The antique shop stood nestled between a bustling bakery and a dimly lit bookstore. Its dusty windows hinted at forgotten treasures and whispered tales of bygone eras. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of aged wood and the musty perfume of time. Emily, a lover of all things vintage, found herself drawn to the shop's charm one blustery afternoon. Stepping inside, she was greeted by a comforting silence, a stark contrast to the storm raging just beyond the door. The shopkeeper, a frail old man with eyes that held the wisdom of ages, offered a warm smile from behind the counter. The shop was a labyrinth of forgotten memories, each corner revealing another piece of history. The radio was an unassuming thing, its wooden casing scratched and faded, the fabric covering its speaker torn in places. Yet something about its simple design, its promise of connecting to worlds beyond, called to Emily. Turning it over, she discovered a small brass plaque on its underside, engraved with the words Melodia Radio Company, 1938. Intrigued, Emily took the radio to the shopkeeper, her fingers tracing the inscription on its plaque. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice barely a whisper in the hushed quiet of the shop. The old man took the radio from her, his gnarled fingers handling it with a reverence that bordered on sacred. "A fine piece," he finally said, his voice raspy with age. "From a time before television stole our attention, when the radio was our only window to the outside world. It still works, you know." Despite the shopkeeper's cryptic warning, Emily couldn't resist the allure of the vintage radio. She purchased it without hesitation, its surprisingly low price only adding to its mystique. Back in her cozy apartment, with the rain still lashing against the windows, Emily placed the radio on her bedside table. Plugging it in, she hesitantly turned the dial, half expecting to be met with silence or the crackling static of a bygone era. Instead, a low hum filled the air, a steady thrumming that seemed to resonate deep within her chest. As she continued to turn the dial, the hum intensified, morphing into a cacophony of static and fragmented sounds. Then, through the static, she heard it. A voice. A child's voice, filled with fear and a heart-wrenching sadness that tugged at Emily's very soul. It spoke in fragmented sentences, words lost to the static. But its message was clear. "Help me." Night after night, Emily found herself drawn back to the radio, its static-laced whispers both terrifying and strangely addictive. The child's voice, though still fragmented and elusive, became a nightly companion, a constant presence in her otherwise silent apartment. She tried everything to decipher the messages hidden within the static, adjusting the tuning, changing the antenna, even consulting online forums dedicated to vintage radio enthusiasts. But the voice remained frustratingly out of reach, a ghostly echo trapped within the radio's circuitry. Sleep became a fleeting visitor, often arriving only when exhaustion finally overwhelmed her. Even then, her dreams were haunted by the child's voice, pleading for help from a place beyond her reach. During her waking hours, Emily found herself constantly listening for the telltale hum of the radio, her thoughts consumed by the mystery of the trapped voice. As the days morphed into nights, Emily's apartment, once a sanctuary of comfort and familiarity, transformed into a breeding ground for her mounting unease. The shadows seemed to stretch further, deeper into the corners of her vision. Each creak of the floorboard, each groan of the old building sounded like whispered warnings, urging her to sever the connection she'd forged with the ethereal realm. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to abandon Sam, not while his pleas for help still echoed in her ears. The radio, once an object of intrigue, now pulsed with an unsettling energy. Its presence seemed to warp the atmosphere around it, casting an almost tangible chill over the room. Even when unplugged, it seemed to hum with a low internal vibration, a constant reminder of the unseen world she'd stumbled upon. The line between reason and the supernatural, once a clear demarcation for Emily, started to blur. She found herself questioning her own sanity, wondering if the stress of her solitary life had finally pushed her over the edge. Yet, the chilling reality of Sam's voice, his palpable fear and desperation, kept her tethered to the belief that something truly extraordinary and terrifying was unfolding. One night, as a thunderstorm raged outside, mimicking the tempestuous energy that seemed to crackle around the vintage radio, Emily experienced a terrifying escalation of the supernatural events that had plagued her. The air in her apartment grew thick and heavy, charged with an unseen energy that prickled at her skin. The radio, which she'd unplugged days ago, hummed to life, its dial glowing with an eerie internal light. Fear, cold and paralyzing, gripped Emily's heart in a vice-like squeeze. She tried to move, to put distance between herself and the radio that seemed to pulsate with malevolent energy, but her limbs felt leaden, her body refusing to obey the commands of her terrified mind. The room, once her haven, became a battleground of unseen forces. The air crackled with static electricity, making the hairs on Emily's arms stand on end. Furniture rattled, books toppled from their shelves, and a high-pitched whine emanated from the radio. Static Child Sam advanced towards Emily, his movements jerky and unnatural. "You interfered!" he hissed, his voice a distorted echo. "You brought me here!" Emily, her back pressed against the wall, knew she had to escape. The radio wasn't just a conduit, it was a prison. She had to break the connection. Mustering every ounce of courage she possessed, Emily lunged for the nearest object, a heavy antique bookend shaped like a snarling gargoyle. It felt surprisingly solid in her trembling hands, a tangible weapon against the intangible terror that held her captive. As Static Child Sam, his form flickering with static electricity, advanced towards her, his glowing eyes fixed on her with an unnerving intensity, Emily swung the bookend with all her might. It connected with a sickening thud, not with the sickening give of flesh and bone, but with the solidity of something far more resistant, far more alien. The force of the blow sent a jolt of pain shooting up her arm, but she didn't hesitate. She swung again and again, each strike fueled by a primal fear and a desperate need to survive. The room around her seemed to warp and distort with each blow, the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural dissolving into a chaotic blur. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the chaos ceased. The air, thick with static only moments ago, cleared. The following morning, the rising sun painted the sky in hues of hope, but Emily felt none of it. She moved through her apartment, her body stiff and sore, her mind reeling from the previous night. The chaos left by Static Child Sam was a stark reminder of the terrifying reality. She knew she couldn't stay, not with the memory of glowing eyes and crackling static. The radio, now a chilling symbol, couldn't remain in her sight. Emily wrapped the radio in an old tapestry, its patterns holding back the darkness. She had to return it to the antique shop on Mulberry Street. The walk felt surreal, the familiar streets warped by her ordeal. Emily, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, placed the tapestry-wrapped radio on the counter, its weight heavier than she remembered. "It's not what I thought it was," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's dangerous." The shopkeeper's smile widened, revealing teeth stained yellow with age, his eyes twinkling with an unsettling amusement. "Dangerous?" he echoed, his voice a low chuckle. "My dear, all antiques hold a certain energy. It's up to the owner to decide whether they're willing to listen." He reached out, his gnarled fingers brushing against the tapestry, and for a fleeting moment, Emily could have sworn she heard a faint crackling sound, a whisper of static that sent shivers down her spine. "But don't you worry," the shopkeeper continued, his voice smooth and reassuring. "I have a feeling this particular antique will find a new home soon enough. There's always someone willing to listen."